She got scammed out of nearly her entire life savings.
I would have had to change my life completely. And that would have not made me happy at all.
An 86-year-old woman in New York woke up one morning to what looked like an urgent warning flashing across her computer screen. And by the time the nightmare was over, every single dollar she had spent a lifetime saving was gone. Nina Mortalito, a woman who had carefully built up $700,000 over the course of her life, lost it all. Not to a stock market crash, not to a bad investment, but to a scam so calculated and so coldly executed that it left investigators stunned. The warning on her screen told her that her bank accounts were being actively hacked, that her money was in immediate danger, and that she needed to act fast. Panic set in, and that panic is exactly what the criminals behind this scheme were counting on. What followed was a series of withdrawals from three of the most recognized financial institutions in the country, Merrill Lynch, UBS Financial, and TD Bank, that drained her accounts down to nothing across 2023 and 2024. This was not a woman who made large withdrawals. In her entire account history, she had never once pulled out more than $5,000 at a time. Yet somehow, hundreds of thousands of dollars moved out of her accounts without a single alarm being raised by the banks holding her money. What happened to Nina Mortalito is being called negligence. Others are calling it something far worse. The scam that unraveled Nina Mortalito's financial life did not begin with a phone call from a stranger or a suspicious email from an unknown address. It began with a pop-up, a single flashing warning on her computer screen that told her everything she owned was at risk. Scammers operating this type of scheme are sophisticated, rehearsed, and utterly ruthless in the way they exploit fear. Once that pop-up appeared, individuals posing as law enforcement officials and representatives from trusted technology and financial companies contacted her, presenting themselves as the very people who could protect her. They told her the only way to secure her funds was to withdraw them immediately and move them somewhere safe, somewhere they controlled. This is the core blueprint of what investigators call a tech support imposter scam. And it is devastatingly effective because it weaponizes trust. Nina was instructed to make a series of large, uncharacteristic withdrawals across multiple institutions, and she complied because every instinct she had told her she was doing the right thing to protect herself. One transfer alone sent $150,000 to a gold trader based in Texas, framed as a safekeeping arrangement. No legitimate government agency, no real law enforcement body, and no genuine financial institution will ever contact you and demand you move your money to protect it. That instruction, in every case, every single time, is the scam itself. And Nina Mortalito never had a chance to know that before it was too late. What makes Nina Mortalito's case particularly chilling is not just the scale of the loss. It is the trail of warnings that existed long before a single dollar disappeared. Warnings that were formally documented and handed directly to the institutions now being sued. Back in 2021, Nina had already filed a fraud claim, signaling to anyone paying attention that she had been targeted before and that she was vulnerable. Following that incident, her niece, Vail Mace, was added as co-trustee and granted power of attorney across all three of her accounts at Merrill Lynch, UBS, and TD Bank, a deliberate and legally documented step taken specifically to protect her from financial exploitation. Those institutions were not guessing about her vulnerability. They were formally on notice. When the withdrawals began in 2023 and stretched into 2024, they were not subtle. They were massive, sudden, and completely inconsistent with every financial behavior Nina had demonstrated across her entire account history. A woman who had never once withdrawn more than $5,000 in a single transaction was suddenly moving funds in amounts that dwarfed her lifetime withdrawal patterns. According to her lawsuit, not one of the three banks paused those transactions, contacted her co-trustee, reached out to the person holding power of attorney, or declined the transfers as suspicious. The legal complaint describes the institutions as having failed to implement proper safeguards while ignoring obvious red flags. And the weight of that allegation is almost impossible to overstate given everything the banks already knew. Nina Mortalito's story is devastating on its own, but the brutal reality is that she is not an outlier. She is part of a tidal wave of financial destruction sweeping through the lives of older Americans at a scale that most people have no idea is happening. The Federal Trade Commission recently released its annual report to Congress focused specifically on protecting older adults from financial fraud, and the findings read like something out of a financial horror story. Total fraud losses reported by Americans over the age of 60 increased by 400% between 2020 and 2024, reaching $2.4 billion in losses in 2024 alone. And investigators are quick to point out that even that staggering figure is almost certainly a significant undercount of the true damage, because a large portion of victims never report what happened to them. The shame, the confusion, and the fear of not being believed keep countless cases buried in silence every single year. The two categories of fraud hitting older Americans hardest are investment scams and imposter scams. The same deadly combination present in Nina's case. These are not random, unsophisticated attacks. They are highly organized operations targeting the most financially vulnerable members of society, and they are accelerating. The people running these schemes understand exactly how to manufacture urgency, how to replicate authority, and how to exploit the trust that older generations tend to place in institutions and figures of power. The numbers do not lie, and they are only getting uglier. Nina Mortolito's lawsuit does not exist in isolation. It lands in the middle of a growing legal storm that has been building around major financial institutions and their handling of elder fraud and online scam activity. In January of 2024, New York Attorney General Letitia James filed a lawsuit directly against Citibank, one of the largest financial institutions in the world, accusing it of failing to protect its customers from email phishing attacks and text message scams that resulted in devastating financial losses. The lawsuit described Citibank's internal security practices as woefully inadequate, laying out specific incidents in painful detail to illustrate the pattern. In one case highlighted in the complaint, a Citibank customer received a text message that appeared to come directly from the bank, instructing her to click a link that redirected her to a fraudulent website designed to look exactly like Citibank's real platform. Once she clicked, her login credentials were stolen, her password was changed to lock her out, her account was quietly enrolled in online wire transfer services without her knowledge, and $40,000 from her retirement savings was wired out to an account controlled by the criminals behind the scheme. She had never once initiated a wire transfer from that account in her life, a fact that, according to the lawsuit, should have triggered an immediate flag and a call from the bank to verify the transaction. It did not. The parallels to Nina Mortolito's case are striking, and they point toward something more troubling than individual negligence. They suggest a systemic pattern across the industry. The tools to prevent what happened to Nina Mortolito exist. They are not theoretical, they are not complicated, and they are not expensive. They are features and protocols that financial institutions already have access to, which makes the failure to use them even harder to justify. Browser security settings and pop-up blockers could have stopped the initial fake warning from ever reaching her screen, cutting the scam off before it could begin. Beyond that basic layer, banks and brokerage firms have the ability to configure accounts so that a trusted contact is automatically notified anytime a transaction appears suspicious or falls outside the account holder's established patterns. Large transfers can be set up to require approval from two authorized parties before they are processed, creating a buffer that protects vulnerable account holders from acting impulsively under manufactured pressure. Automated real-time monitoring systems can push immediate alerts to designated family members the moment unusual activity is detected. Wire transfers, new payees, large withdrawals, giving someone the chance to intervene before money leaves the account permanently. The problem, according to reporting and legal filings, is that adoption of these safeguards remains inconsistent and dangerously patchy. Only about half of all U.S. states have enacted laws giving banks the legal authority to temporarily delay or outright refuse transactions when they believe a vulnerable older adult is being exploited. And in those states where the law does exist, research from the American Banking Association indicates that only about half of the banks in those states are actually following it. The gap between what is available and what is being practiced is not a small one. It is the gap that cost Nina Mortolito $700,000. There are rules. Actual, enforceable, written rules, specifically designed to prevent exactly what happened to Nina Mortolito. And the fact that they did not protect her raises serious questions about whether the financial industry is treating those rules as genuine obligations or as boxes to quietly check and move on from. The Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, the private regulatory body that oversees broker-dealers and their registered representatives under the supervision of the Securities and Exchange Commission, has two specific rules in place targeting the exploitation of older clients. The first is Rule 4512, which requires that brokers ask every client for the name of a trusted contact person. Someone who can be reached when a firm suspects fraud or believes a client may be experiencing diminished cognitive capacity. Nina Mortolito had not only provided a trusted contact, she had gone further and formally established a co-trustee and a power of attorney holder specifically for this purpose, giving her institutions every tool they needed to intervene. The second rule is Rule 2165, which gives investment firms the explicit authority to place temporary holds of up to 15 business days on account disbursements when they have reasonable grounds to suspect that a client who is 65 years old or older is being financially exploited. That authority was available. It was not used. The rules existed in writing, the warning signs existed in the account history, and the legal mechanisms to pause those transactions were sitting right there. And yet $700,000 still walked out the door. That is the part of this story that demands an answer. Nina Mortolito's case is not going to fade quietly into a court filing. It is a flashpoint in a much larger conversation about who bears responsibility when vulnerable people are systematically stripped of everything they have built across a lifetime, and whether the financial institutions entrusted to safeguard those assets have any real accountability when they fail. Scammers are evolving fast. They are using artificial intelligence to clone voices, fabricating official-looking documentation, and running coordinated multi-platform operations that would confuse people half Nina's age. The criminals behind these schemes are not amateurs working out of basements. They are organized, funded, and frighteningly effective at what they do. But the more uncomfortable truth surfacing through cases like hers is that the banks holding these funds had warnings, had legal tools, had documented vulnerability disclosures, and had power of attorney paperwork sitting in their systems, and still let the money leave. Whether a jury ultimately finds legal negligence in Nina Mortolito's specific case remains to be seen, but the moral weight of this situation is not complicated. When an 86-year-old woman adds a trusted contact to her accounts specifically because she knows she is at risk, and then loses every dollar she owns while 3 institutions process the transactions without a single phone call to that contact, something has gone profoundly wrong. Every person watching this likely knows someone who could be the next Nina Mortolito. The question worth sitting with is not whether these scams are getting worse. They are. The real question is whether the systems built to stop them are ever going to be held to the same standard as the people they were designed to protect.